Water turns into wine. Joy returns to a wedding that seemed finished. The wedding celebration in Cana was already underway. Families and friends had gathered to bless the beginning of a new home, share food, and rejoice with the bride and bridegroom. But before the feast was over, the wine ran out. What had begun as a joyful celebration was quietly moving toward embarrassment. Mary noticed the problem and told Jesus. Jesus answered that his hour had not yet come, but Mary turned to the servants and said, "Do whatever he tells you." She simply directed them to listen to Jesus and obey his words. Nearby stood 6 large stone jars used for Jewish purification rites. Jesus said, "Fill the jars with water." From the servant's point of view, the instruction may have seemed unrelated to the problem. The feast did not need more water. It needed wine. Yet Jesus gave no explanation and simply told them to fill the stone jars. The servants moved without arguing. The gospel says they filled the jars to the brim. Their obedience was complete even though their understanding was not. Faith does not always begin after every question has been answered. Sometimes it begins when a person hears the word of Jesus and takes the next step before knowing how the road will end. When the jars were full, Jesus gave another instruction. "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." The servants knew exactly what they had poured into the jars. Still, they followed the instruction of Jesus. They drew from the jar and carried it to the master of the feast. There was no loud announcement and no public display. There was only the word of Jesus, the obedience of the servants, and a quiet transformation no human hand could produce. When the master of the feast tasted what they brought, it was no longer water. It was wine of remarkable quality. The master did not know where it had come from, but the servants knew. They knew what had been in the jars and whose instruction they had followed. Because they listened and obeyed, they stood near the place where the power of Jesus was revealed. After tasting the wine, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have had plenty to drink, but you have kept the good wine until now." Most hosts served their best wine at the beginning of a feast. But in Cana, the best came later. At the moment when the celebration seemed close to failure, something better appeared. In reality, the gift had come from Jesus. The guests lifted their cups again, and joy returned to the room. Jesus did not expose the family's shortage before everyone. He did not turn their embarrassment into an opportunity to display his power. Instead, he quietly provided what was missing. He covered their shame and restored their joy without demanding public attention. The provision was abundant, but the one who gave it remained quietly present among the guests. The shortage was replaced by abundance. The empty cups were filled again, and the celebration that seemed ready to end received more than enough to continue. Yet this story is not simply about receiving a large amount of what we need. The Gospel of John calls this event a sign. A sign is a miracle, but it also points beyond itself. It directs attention toward the identity and glory of Jesus. The water becoming wine rescued a wedding feast, but it also revealed that the man standing quietly among the guests was more than a teacher from Nazareth. He carried authority over creation itself. The gospel simply tells us that Jesus spoke, the servants obeyed, and what had been water was received as excellent wine. This first sign showed that Jesus did not only speak words of comfort. He possessed the power to make things new. He could bring a beginning into a place that appeared finished. He could turn lack into abundance and ordinary water into a gift of joy. The stone jars were used for ceremonial washing and held water connected with outward purification. Yet through the word of Jesus, that water became wine connected with celebration and gladness. The image suggests that Jesus had come to bring something new and full. He came to fulfill what God had prepared and to open a deeper joy with him. At Cana, Jesus did not treat human joy as unimportant. The joy of Cana, however, was more than a pleasant atmosphere. It was joy restored by the presence of Jesus. Human preparation had run out, but his provision had not. The family's plans had reached their limit, but that limit did not become the limit of his power. There are moments in our lives when something feels as though it has run out. Patience becomes thin. Hope feels empty. A relationship may lose its warmth, or a long-held expectation may begin to collapse. Outwardly, everything may still look normal, while inwardly the celebration has already begun to fade. The story of Cana does not promise that Jesus will solve every problem in exactly the way we request. It does not give us a formula for obtaining whatever we want. But it does show that human lack is not the end of His ability. A place that seems finished to us may still become a place where His grace begins to work. The joy Jesus gives is not always the joy of perfect circumstances. Sometimes it is the joy of discovering that He has come near in the middle of our lack. He does not stand at a distance and shame us for what we failed to prepare. He meets us where we are empty, covers what would humiliate us, and gives what we cannot produce on our own. The servants also teach us an important distinction. They were not responsible for creating the miracle. Their work was to fill the jars and carry what Jesus told them to carry. Turning water into wine belonged to Jesus alone. We often carry a burden as though every result depends entirely on us. We try to repair every relationship, control every outcome, and create changes beyond our strength. But the servants at Cana show us the difference between obedience and transformation. They filled the jars. Jesus changed the water. They carried the cup. Jesus provided the wine. Faith does not mean forcing ourselves to accomplish what only God can do. Faith means doing what has been placed before us while trusting Jesus with the work beyond our power. Filling the jars was difficult, but possible. Changing the water was impossible, but it was not the servant's responsibility. We are called to honesty, patience, forgiveness, and faithful action. We are not called to become the source of every miracle. The master of the feast tasted the gift without knowing its source. The bridegroom received honor without knowing how close he had come to embarrassment. The guests enjoyed the celebration without realizing that a miracle had taken place nearby. But the servants knew, and the disciples were watching. Within the same room, some people enjoyed the gift while others began to recognize the giver. This can also happen in our lives. We may receive daily mercies without noticing where they come from. Help arrives at an unexpected moment. A difficult season becomes bearable. A quiet comfort enters the heart. The story of Cana does not ask us to label every event a miracle. It invites us to live with open eyes and a grateful heart. It teaches us to look beyond the gift and remember the one from whom every good thing comes. John writes that through this sign Jesus revealed His glory. The glory of Jesus was not shown only through brightness, thunder, or public praise. It appeared in the quiet rescue of a family. It appeared through the obedience of unnamed servants. It appeared when shame was covered and joy was restored. This was not glory that pushed others down in order to rise higher. It was glory that gave life, protected dignity, and filled what was empty. The disciples saw this sign and believed in Him. They did not understand everything about Jesus in that moment. They still had much to learn. But at Cana, their faith took another step. They saw authority, kindness, abundance, and glory in Jesus. Faith often grows in this way. It does not always arrive as complete understanding in a single moment. It grows as people watch what Jesus does, remember His words, and learn to trust His character. The disciples had already begun to follow Him. Now, through this first sign, they began to see more clearly who they were following. The crisis at the wedding passed. The guests continued to rejoice, and the family was spared public shame. But the event became more than a story about one celebration being saved. It became the first sign in the Gospel of John, a quiet announcement of what the presence of Jesus brings. Where people see an ending, He can open a beginning. Where resources are exhausted, His grace is not exhausted. Where joy has faded, He can restore it. Not every guest understood the secret of that day, but the servants knew what had been placed in the jars. The disciples saw the glory of Jesus. Through the gospel, we are also invited to stand near that moment and look. We are invited to bring our empty places to Him without pretending they are full. We are invited to obey the next clear word without demanding to understand the entire path. We are invited to stop trying to create with our own strength what only Jesus can provide. The story of Cana is not only a display of power, it is a revelation of the heart of Jesus. He did not mock those who lacked. He did not abandon a family that had failed to prepare enough. He quietly entered their need, protected them from shame, and gave more than they could have provided for themselves. The feast that seemed ready to end continued. The cups were filled again. The wine in those cups did not come from the servant's skill or the bridegroom's preparation. It came through the word and grace of Jesus. The people tasted the wine and continued the celebration. The disciples looked beyond the gift and saw his glory. That is also the faith this story invites from us. It is the faith of servants who fill the jars because Jesus has spoken. It is the faith of disciples who look beyond the blessing and recognize the one who gives it. Jesus turned water into wine. Through this first sign, he showed that when everything seems to have run out, the grace of God has not reached its end. May the grace of Jesus, who fills empty places with renewed joy, quietly fill your heart today as well with comfort, hope, and joy that begins anew.